Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Photography with Imre. That would be me. And this is actually part 4 of the Flash miniseries, this time on the slow sync mode. Before we get into slow sync flash modes, let's take a look at what pictures would look like without them. Here's the setup. We have our subject standing right in front of us, and behind are some buildings. It's now dark outside, so there's not enough light to get a decent exposure on the subject without using the flash. So I set my camera to auto flash and take a shot. Here's the result. Our subject is well lit, but the cityscape is almost completely dark. The outcome here is simple. Our flash is strong enough to illuminate the subject only a couple of meters away, but obviously not powerful enough to light up the city far in the distance. Also, the shutter speed was just right to expose the subject with the flash on, but it should have stayed open for a longer period of time in order to properly expose the dimly lit city. When you're set to auto flash, the camera adjusts the shutter speed to go as fast as possible based on the lighting condition. In similar cases to the example here, when there's little available light, the camera usually sets the shutter speed to around 1/30th or 1/60th of a second. So how do we get the background and the subject to expose properly? The answer is to use a slow sync mode, and it's quite easy to understand how it works. Now there are 2 slow sync modes, but I'll get to those a little bit later. For now, here's what you need to know. When we adjust our camera to use this setting, the flash still fires as it normally would, except the camera keeps the shutter open longer, in other words, slows the shutter speed down further. This allows the dim light from the background to collect on the sensor for a longer period of time, while the light output from the flash is perfect to expose our subject. So using our cityscape example, the flash still goes off when the shutter opens, but the shutter now stays open for a whole second, which allows the dark background to expose properly. How long the shutter stays open will depend on lighting conditions and what the camera's meter decides, or you can override the setting by using shutter priority or full manual mode to lock the shutter speed to whatever you would like it to be. Now let's examine those 2 slow sync modes. The first mode is called slow sync first curtain and the other is slow sync second curtain. By the way, on some cameras there's a slow sync mode for red eye, but that one speaks for itself, so I'll leave that for you to experiment with. By now you're probably familiar with what the first and second curtains are. If you aren't, then check out episode 2 or 14 of my photography series for a quick lesson. In slow sync first curtain mode, the flash fires as soon as the first curtain of the shutter opens. In slow sync second curtain mode, you guessed it, the flash fires just before the second curtain closes. Like I said, easy to understand, but what is the visual difference between the 2 modes? Well, let's take a couple of pictures to find out. To demonstrate this, I've set up my camera to take a 3-second exposure using slow sync first curtain. With my remote control, I'll activate my camera with a small delay so I can get ready, and then I'll walk across the frame with my totally awesome blinking flashlight. Sorry. That's better. So, I activate my camera, the shutter opens, and the flash fires. The shutter remains open for the duration of the exposure, and then closes. As you can see, nothing spectacular happened at the end where the shutter closed. Now I'll do the same thing, but with the camera set to second curtain mode. I once again activate my camera, and after the 2-second delay, the shutter opens, but this time, no flash. Now, just before the second curtain closes, you'll see the flash, and the exposure is complete. Putting the 2 images side by side nicely reveals the visual difference between the first and second curtain flash modes. Generally, the second curtain mode is quite popular, as you can see some sense of movement in the picture with light streaking away from the subject, but the choice is ultimately yours. And just a couple of quick notes before I end the episode. I took these pictures with my flash set to manual mode, so the pre-flash would not fire when I took the shots. Using your flash set to manual mode is useful in cases where you might be using slave flashes, or if you don't want a potentially distracting pre-flash to go off. However, using manual flash means you have to set the power output of the flash, which means you may have to use experimentation or a light meter to get the exposure on your subject correct. This is where using your flash in auto mode might make things easier in some cases, because that pre-flash helps the camera's metering system decide what flash output should be used to get a proper exposure on the subject. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on slow sync mode, and do stay tuned for the next episode. That'll finalize the Flash mini-series. It'll be on Fill Flash. I couldn't quite squeeze that into this episode, so it'll be done for the next one. But nonetheless, check out my blog. There will be a supplemental post, and I am now on the Twitter, so if you want to follow me, it's at Binary Graphite. You can see a little thing at the bottom here, and still on Facebook as well, so you can check me out there and become a fan. And do subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the goodies that I'm up to. And I certainly hope to see you next time. Take care.